Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're doing a deep dive today, and it's all about Roger Federer.
Ooh, fun.
It is fun,
Yeah.
but this isn't just like a typical greatest hits of Federer's career or anything like that.
Right.
We've got these excerpts from this really interesting biographical piece,
Okay.
and it really digs into the man behind the racket. Like his struggles and his
Right.
philosophies,
Yeah.
and what his journey can teach us about resilience and pushing boundaries.
Yeah, one of the things that really stood out to me in this piece
Yeah.
is that it doesn't shy away from Federer's early doubts.
Oh, interesting.
We often see these iconic athletes as almost superhuman,
Right.
but here we see Federer at 14 leaving home to train.
14.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine what I was worried about at 14.
Right.
Let alone that kind of pressure.
Exactly. And the source material really emphasizes that pressure.
Yeah. Did they touch on what drove him to make that leap at that age?
Yeah.
Was it purely ambition, or was there something more to it?
I think it was a combination of things,
Okay.
Obviously, natural talent was a huge part of it.
Yeah.
But also this really deep-seated belief in himself, even at that young age.
Mm.
His parents were supportive, but he was the one who ultimately made the decision to leave his comfort zone
Right.
and chase this dream.
So it sounds like he really had that drive from a very young age.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, though, was that self-belief always there, or did it kind of develop through those early challenges?
It's a great question.
And because, the source mentions that he almost quit at one point.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what I find so relatable about his story.
Yeah.
He wasn't this fearless prodigy. He struggled, he doubted himself, he even considered giving up.
Wow.
But what the source really emphasizes is that those early struggles,
Yeah.
that feeling of being on the verge of quitting ultimately forged his mental toughness.
Interesting.
It became like the foundation for his future success.
So we had this young Federer battling self-doubt, pushing through incredible pressure,
Mm-hmm.
and then boom, 2003 Wimbledon.
Oh, yeah.
And it wasn't just the win, it was the way he dominated.
His game was captivating.
Oh, yeah.
The source describes it as this blend of elegance and precision, on grass especially. His footwork was balletic.
Oh, I love that.
And then his forehand, that signature grip, slightly more Eastern than most,
Right.
allowed him to generate just incredible topspin.
Yeah.
So the ball would just dip viciously. Opponents couldn't read it.
As a tennis fan, I remember watching those matches and thinking, is this guy even human?
Right.
But even Federer at his peak, he couldn't stay unchallenged forever.
Of course not.
And that's when Nadal and Djokovic enter the picture.
Right. And this
Remember-
is where it gets really interesting because they weren't just rivals.
Yeah.
They were stylistic counterpoints to Federer.
Yeah. Explain that a little bit.
So Nadal, with his relentless power and heavy topspin,
Mm.
particularly on clay, presented a challenge unlike anything Federer had faced before.
And Djokovic.
Oh, yeah.
So different.
Completely different game with his incredible court coverage and ability to turn defense into offense.
Right.
Equally formidable.
I remember watching the 2008 Wimbledon final.
Oh, man.
Heartbroken as Nadal edged out Federer in what many consider one of the greatest matches of all time.
Yeah, one for the ages.
Did the source material cover how Federer handled that loss?
It did.
Okay.
And here's where the source provides a really interesting insight. It quotes Federer as saying that while the loss was devastating,
Yeah.
it also ignited a fire in him.
Mm.
He realized that to stay at the top, he had to constantly adapt, evolve, and find new ways to counter his rival's strengths.
So it wasn't just about physical talent anymore. It was about mental resilience and tactical adaptation.
Exactly.
That's a lesson that goes way beyond the tennis court.
Absolutely.
We all face competition in our lives, whether it's in our careers or personal pursuits.
Right. We all have our own Nadals and Djokovic.
That's a good way to put it.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But what Federer's story shows us is that true greatness isn't about never losing. It's about how you respond to those losses.
Yeah.
It's about analyzing your weaknesses, learning from your mistakes, and constantly seeking ways to improve.
Even the strongest will can be tested when your own body becomes the obstacle.
Oh, yeah.
That's what happened to Federer in 2016, right?
Yeah.
The knee surgery, the long rehab, the uncertainty. It must have been incredibly challenging.
It was. The source describes this period as a real turning point in Federer's career.
Interesting.
He was facing not just physical limitations, but also existential doubts.
Yeah.
He wondered if he would ever be able to play at the same level, if he even wanted to put his body through that grind again.
I remember reading an interview where he talked about the fear,
Yeah.
the thought that maybe his career was over.
It's a fear, I think, that anyone who's passionate about something can relate to. That feeling that something outside your control could take away the thing you love most.
Exactly.
And it's remarkable, even with all those doubts, he didn't rush back.
Yeah.
The source mentions how his team, even his rivals, were urging patience. It really shows his self-awareness that he didn't just succumb to that pressure.
Yeah, it would have been so easy to try to force a comeback and prove everyone wrong right away.
Exactly.
But instead, he took his time, focused on rebuilding, not just physically, but mentally. And then 2017, he wins both the Australian Open and Wimbledon.
It was like a fairy tale comeback.
I know.
Defying all expectations. But it wasn't just a return to his old form either.
Right.
The source really digs into how his game had evolved.
Well, how so?
He was playing more aggressively, taking the ball earlier, shortening points.
Interesting.
He had even incorporated elements of his rivals' styles into his own.
Oh, wow.
It's like he absorbed their strengths during his time away.
See, this is where I wish the source had more, technical analysis.
I know, right?
Did his serve change?
Yeah.
His backhand was always considered kind of a weakness. Did he improve it, or did his new style just compensate for it?
Yeah, unfortunately, the source focuses more on the narrative of the comeback than the technical specifics.
Okay.
But it does mention how Federer worked extensively on his fitness during rehab.
Okay.
Which allowed him to maintain that aggressive style deep into tournaments.
So the injury kind of forced him to reinvent himself.
In a way, yeah.
And it wasn't just on the court either.
Right.
This piece also dives into his foundation's work in Africa.
Yeah.
I was actually surprised by how much emphasis it placed on education as a tool for empowerment.
This is where we see Federer's legacy going way beyond just trophies and titles.
Yeah.
The source really highlights his belief that education is the key to breaking the cycle of poverty. And it's not just lip service. He's actively involved visiting schools, meeting with students, using his platform to raise awareness.
It's interesting because this side of him, the philanthropist, isn't as widely discussed as his on-court accomplishments.
Right.
Did the source shed any light on what motivated him to focus on education specifically?
It suggests that his own experiences traveling the world as a young tennis player really opened his eyes to the inequalities that exist. He saw firsthand the lack of opportunities in many communities and felt compelled to use his success to make a difference.
So we've got this incredible athlete who faced down doubts, reinvented himself, and is actively trying to make the world a better place.
Yeah, it's pretty inspiring.
But the source also mentions this speech he gave at Dartmouth.
Oh, yeah.
Where he shared 3 life lessons. And I'm curious to hear what you thought about those.
Well, I thought they were really insightful. Those lessons, effort, acceptance, and balance.
Yeah.
They really encapsulate Federer's approach to life. The source quotes him saying, "Talent is a gift, but it's effort that unlocks its true potential." He emphasizes that there are no shortcuts to success, that hard work and dedication are essential.
And this coming from a guy who made tennis look effortless.
I know, right?
It's a good reminder that even those with natural gifts have to put in the work.
Absolutely.
But what about that second lesson, accepting imperfection?
Yeah.
That seems counterintuitive for someone who achieved such a high level of mastery.
Right. It's fascinating, isn't it? Because his whole career seems like this pursuit of perfection.
Yeah.
But the source quotes him saying, "Chasing perfection can be paralyzing. It's important to embrace your flaws and learn from your mistakes."
Wow, that's so powerful. Especially in today's social media world,
Right.
where everyone's trying to project this image of flawlessness. It's refreshing to hear someone like Federer acknowledge the importance of imperfection.
Totally. And he's saying it's okay to make mistakes, to not be perfect all the time.
Yeah.
In fact, it's those imperfections, those moments of vulnerability that make us human and allow us to grow.
And then there's that third lesson, balance.
Yeah.
That one really hit home for me. Federer, at the pinnacle of his career, is talking about the importance of family, friends, and having interests outside of tennis.
It's almost a radical idea,
Yeah.
In a world that often glorifies the workaholic, the one who sacrifices everything for success.
Right.
But Federer's advocating for a more holistic approach.
Yeah.
He's saying that true fulfillment comes from finding that balance between your passions and the other aspects of your life that bring you joy and meaning.
Which brings us to that bittersweet moment in 2022, his retirement.
Yeah.
I remember watching the Laver Cup, seeing him break down in tears alongside Nadal.
Oh, man.
And just feeling this wave of emotion. And it wasn't just sadness. It was gratitude for everything he had given us.
The source captures that perfectly. It describes Federer's retirement as a celebration not just of his accomplishments, but of his character, his sportsmanship, and just the way he conducted himself on and off the court.
It really felt like the end of an era, but also the beginning of something new, like he was passing the torch.
Right.
Not just to the next generation of tennis players, but to all of us.
Yeah.
Inspiring us to live our lives with that same grace, passion, and commitment to excellence.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm curious what stands out to you the most from this piece?
I think what strikes me most is how Federer's story is ultimately about the power of human potential. It's a reminder that we all have the capacity for greatness,
Yeah.
And not just in the sense of like achieving extraordinary things, but in how we face adversity, how we treat others, and how we use our talents to make a positive impact on the world.
That's a perfect note to end on. Federer's journey is such a powerful reminder that success isn't just about reaching the top. It's about the climb itself, the lessons learned along the way, and the legacy we leave behind.
Well said.
So as you go out into the world today, remember those lessons. Embrace your imperfections, and never stop striving for that balance that allows you to live a life that's both meaningful and fulfilling. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.